So, hello everyone. Okay, so the previous speech was about fear, and I'm glad we brought that up. But I would like to focus on anxiety. I would like to dive deeper into the anxiety concept. So, how often do you believe you're not able to do something? How does it work that at times we are so close to making a decision or taking action, but then are too scared to take this last final step, to cross the barrier, to go out of our comfort zone? And then the chance just passes by, and it's too late. Ladies and gentlemen, the fear of unknown is exactly what stops us and makes us hesitate. It makes our brain freeze and our hands shake. It can intensify how threatening a situation feels. Worrying does not reduce it. Instead, it sets us up to feel even more uneasy. Now, do you want to know a secret? I am a very anxious person. Yes, that is correct. I am dealing with anxiety. I'm also giving speeches to huge audiences at conferences and, of course, talking to you today. The purpose of this talk is to tell you, convince you that your fear, your anxiety is not the end of the world. You can be anxious and still be successful. Frankly, I've always admired people who would walk on the stage and tell others how they overcame their fearness or illnesses. So empowering and truly inspiring. Unfortunately, and to my great disappointment, I cannot provide you with that today, since my fear is still here with me. But what I can do is to tell you a little bit more about it and how I deal with it. Perhaps it will be more interesting that way. So right now, I propose you join me on a little anxiety phenomenon exploration. It is only sensible to think for a moment before making a decision or taking action. Completely normal. But we are a generation of overthinkers. I believe as we progress, there's this urge to know as much as we can, to satisfy our curiosity, but also to feel secure. Many would argue that anxiety is a civilization disease, which many of us, especially our generation, are marked by. To some extent, I must agree with them. I believe that social media have negative side effects on our brain. But before I proceed, I will remind you that I am a teenager myself, and I use those mass media daily with pure joy. However, as much as none of us would admit it, we all fear a little insecure and exposed there. Let's be real. We often encounter such thoughts as, should I post this? Does this reply feel right? And my absolute favorite one, why didn't he like my story? When we think about it, it is not that surprising that this technology might mess with our head. After all, our brain was not developed, was not adapted to stare at a little box for hours. Now, be honest with me. How many of you knew the concept of anxiety and some other mental illnesses in detail, like 3 to 4 years ago, before hearing it from TikTok or Instagram? Raise your hands. How many of you were acquainted with that? As we can see, not that many of us. That is, however, just an anecdote to be mindful before you scroll yet another reel on Instagram. Coming back to the main idea, we have this tendency to focus too much on things we have zero influence on. We waste our time worrying and thinking about things that cannot be helped, instead of looking at what is in front of us. Remember, you have the power to change a lot, but some things you just must accept. And that is, I found, very hard for our human brain. And trust me, I've learned the hard way. Now, story from my life, but it will be brief, bear with me. It all started when I was 6. No, I'm just kidding. Since I was little, I've been blessed with a great imagination. Truly remarkable, I must boast. I could imagine whatever I wanted, sometimes even creating my whole reality in my head. So much fun while even being completely alone. However, as I grew older, I found that with a great imagination comes great burden. After some time, my thoughts would exceed imagining only joyful images and would wander deeper. I specifically started thinking too much about life after death, and what came later, I started having strong panic attacks, which made me unable to fall asleep. Just imagine associating your bed, your safe space, with this painful uneasiness, with this anxiety, which makes you unable to fall asleep. Tired and simply exhausted, that's how I felt. When lying in my bed with my eyes wide open, I kept thinking, okay, is this it? Is this really the way to live my life? I mean, come on, there had to be a way out. What I did was I started from scratch. I remember all the things I dreamed of and wanted to achieve. And as many of us often say, I knew that I couldn't let my monsters eat me alive. Moving on from place as such is unbelievably hard. As I mentioned, I am not free from my anxiety. But would you believe me that the best approach to healing is simply not thinking about the healing process. Once you start doing, you stop thinking. For me, the coping mechanism was completely immersing myself in my work and the things I'm passionate about. I was still pretending I'm not scared of death, but well, it looks like it worked. There's a saying that we humans are born with 2 fears. The first one is the fear of falling. The second one is the fear of loud noises, which both can be achieved by falling off this pipe. The rest of the fears we develop ourselves. Here very often come 2 other factors which stop us: laziness and justification. We humans, we young people, we have this tendency, we like to justify our actions and our lack of action. We like to justify that we are doing, well, nothing. But the half-truth, everyone, the half-truth is that you must earn your feeling of accomplishment. It never comes for free. So when and if you feel like a failure, think of one thing that you have done today to be better tomorrow, to feel better tomorrow. I will give you a second for that. If you can't think of none, I'm sorry, but maybe it's time to change something. I like to believe that we impose most limits on ourselves. This belief gives me some kind of freedom. The problem we have is being too naive. Actually, no. The problem we have is being too naive. We blindly follow rules and dogmas set by society. We devour them like hungry birds. Now, when you hear the term anxious person, how many of you would visualize a strong leader or a CEO? Raise your hands. We have brave ones, but how many of you would visualize a shy and incapable persona? Raise your hands. I would say majority, but there's not so many of us here, so by doing so, we lock our minds in the cages by following certain stereotypes, and this leads me to a conclusion that we do live in society. Now, imagine utterly crazy and unpredictable decision. Let's say I decided to move to Hawaii. What would happen? I'm sure you'll never guess. For the most part, absolutely nothing. The world would still be the same. Well, except from our perspective being full of flowers and coconuts. But My advice: if you cannot follow the rules, just change them. Make your own. Test your anxiety. Show yourself that in the end, it is never or hardly ever as bad as it seemed at the beginning. And so, to finish this speech with my hands shaking, but my head working, I assure you, once you start doing, you stop thinking. Thank you, and thank you for being today.